Okay, on that note, let's get into our main topic. Look, as the series was coming down the path very fast at us, and we were planning how these last months of the year would go, we said, look, we're going to be in the middle of 6 very intense weeks of big hot takes to do. The regular weekly churn out of getting these out within a few hours of it going was going to happen. We said, what are we going to do in the middle of this? We said, let's make it something fun. And inspired by a couple of comments from a couple of listeners who have talked about different crossover stuff, I said, let's just do a crossover show. Let's put together our dream crossovers. And Rob, I don't think you took much convincing that would be the right vibe and idea for this particular episode.
Yeah, I want to do a shout out to our listener, Alicia Neptune on Twitter.
Yes.
Who, in her guise as Latin Alice on YouTube, she challenged her viewers of her YouTube channel to think about putting characters into other properties. And in that video where she did the challenge, she said that she was riffing on our podcast because she was inspired about when we had done New Who Doctors in Classic Stories and Classic Doctors in New Who Stories. So she riffed on us, and now we're riffing on her. So it's really quite meta.
Oh, look, it is. So, look, we didn't set down any particular rules. We sort of agreed informally we'd come to the table with half a dozen each. And I think we've pretty much held to that. But we just said, really simple, pick a TARDIS crew and put them in a TV show. And I don't think we need more explanation than that. So, should we...
Although I do want to say, because we didn't have any rules, it became an interesting exercise for me. Because I want to say Doctor Who crossovers, they're not really much of a thing in general. And when we've had them, like that one where I think Matt Smith crossed over with Star Trek, I found it to be quite a weird thing. So it was an interesting thing to push myself. And in the end, I came up with some examples here where I think you could do a crossover and it would work, for better or worse. Or in other cases, the crossover is more of an example of an era or a story or a movie or whatever, where I think you could insert the Doctor and co. Maybe not dealing with the characters from that property, but just in the same setting. So it became a bit of a mixed bag for me, but I have come up with 6, and I'm going to be bringing 3 TARDIS crews from the classic era and 3 from the modern era.
Well, that's interesting. I have got a mix of classic and modern as well. But look, Rob, you've taken this extremely seriously. I've just had fun. So...
you haven't heard my examples yet.
I'm not saying that yours won't be fun, but look, we have approached them in our own unique ways. Look, enough preamble. We're here to talk about the content. Let's get on with it. Robert, what is your first?
My first is Jodie Whittaker, Yaz and Graham in Wurzel Gummidge. Now,
okay, keep going.
specifically, the new version of the series with Mackenzie Crook in it as Wurzel Gummidge. I think there's a huge crossover here with the kind of viewer who appreciates the Whittaker era and the gentle, kind, almost twee sort of vibe that Wurzel Gummidge has. Put another way, find me someone who likes the Whittaker era, and I think they'd eat Gummidge up, completely, or vice versa. And I can also imagine Jodie talking to Wurzel and really engaging with him in a believable way that I perhaps can't see with other doctors. You put Capaldi in there and it's like, oh, you're a talking scarecrow, you're ridiculous, Whereas Jodie would probably do the whole children's TV presenter thing and be fascinated by him. And, oh, hi, Wurzel, And I can see this actually working. This is an example of where I think you could actually do a crossover.
Yeah, that's a very realistic one. But yeah, I think that they would vibe really, really well. You weren't tempted to go down the John Pertwee Wurzel route?
Oh, I think it was a bit too on the nose, having the 2 doctors in it and all that sort of stuff. So no.
Oh, very cool. That's a good one to start off with. I've got a slightly dry one to start off with, I must admit, but one that I think really would actually genuinely have worked very well. And I'm putting the 7th Doctor and Ace into a mid-90s series called Ultraviolet. Are you familiar with this series, Rob?
That had... was it vampires?
It was vampires, although they never used the word. It was about a secret team composing of Jack Davenport, Susanna Harker, Philip Quast, and a very young Idris Elba.
That's right, yes.
And it was this very dark, secretive team that combated vampires in the UK. And it was very sort of that 90s feel. The vampires were doing experiments on how they could harvest more blood without hurting humans and what they could do to, like how climate change was going to affect their they're feeding, and all that sort of stuff. Or there's one really good one where they think that they're dealing with somebody's son, but it turns out that it's actually somebody's father because vampires don't age. Anyway, it's got all the vampire stuff. It was when vampires were big. It's this really dark UK sci-fi series done very, very dryly and very, very seriously. And I could absolutely see the Doctor working with Philip Quast's character in that, who is a very Doctor-like character. He's actually a priest on secondment from the Vatican because the Vatican sees the vampires as unholy, so is working with the government to lead this team, which is itself an interesting sort of comment. But I can see McCoy's Doctor working with that. I can see Ace going out with Idris Elba's character, who is an ex-army man, and actually fighting these Code V villains. And all the rest of that. And so, yeah, I just thought that tone would work really, really well with the later McCoys. And look, if you haven't seen Ultraviolet, it's only one season of 6 episodes. It's self-contained. If you can get a copy, I thoroughly recommend it. It is a really good piece of television.
Oh, good tip. All right. I've got a McCoy coming up too in a moment.
Excellent. Well, what have you got this time?
But this time around, I've got the Hartnell Doctor, Stephen and Vicky, in the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles.
Ooh.
Now, this came up because I was thinking of the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles and how it's, it's super historical in nature. And it's a kind of series that was basically designed to teach children about history. And I thought, who's the historical Doctor? Well, it's Hartnell. Now, I'll say up front that it's one of those series where I see it as less Hartnell hanging out with young Indy and more Hartnell and co engaging with the storylines and the content that the series had. Because young Indy is set in the early 1900s through to the 1920s. And I find that interesting because it's an era Hartnell didn't really do. Probably because it was too recent, for the 1960s at the time, So you'd have him in the ancient world, or you'd have him 150 years ago in France or whatever, but you wouldn't have him in the Egyptian pyramids pre-World War One or in World War One, and I think that's some interesting stuff. We kind of sort of got World War One in the war games, I guess, with Pat, but it's not really World War One. I guess at this time, actual veterans were still around. They would have been in their 60s. At the time, so maybe the desire to revisit World War One wasn't as huge back then. It wasn't as much an historical era. But looking at it now, if I could put Hartnell into that era that the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles is in, I think that'd be, some fabulous stories.
I haven't seen a lot of those, but from what I've seen, that makes a huge amount of sense. And I think it would be a very fun watch. I'd watch that.
It'd be great, because every episode, hugely historical. It was kind of unrealistic in the way young Indy would meet a famous person from history every episode.
Yeah.
But, if you can put that aside, it was a great series.
Yeah, and as you said, it is that sort of semi-educational sort of thing where that stuff happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that. My second one.
Yes.
I am putting the Third Doctor, Joe and the Brigadier, into To the Manor Born.
Right, yes.
So, when you think Pertwee era, you think the best ones off somewhere in an isolated English village, which got that setting, and then you go, right, the Third Doctor hanging out with Audrey Forbes Hamilton, that's got to happen. The Brigadier hanging out with the Brigadier, that's got to happen. Joe hanging out with the Vicar, that's got to happen. And you just think, if you put a Doctor Who plot, alien invasion, secret conspiracy, something like that into that, you've got a really good cast of characters. Richard De Vere's there. You've got Mrs. Puvelitska, just like Leaving Home in 39. You could have a really good, fun engagement with that series, and it's just the perfect Pertwee setting. And look, basically, I just want to see John Pertwee and Penelope Keith working off each other as the Third Doctor and Audrey. I just think that would be such wonderful fun in an English village.
Knocking back wine and cheese like there's no tomorrow.
Absolutely. He would have been loving it. And then just throw in a pterodactyl or something.
Yeah, of course. I like that, Dave. I like it.
Yeah, I think that would be very fun.
Moving on to my next one, and this is where I bring in McCoy and Ace. I would like to place them in Stranger Things.
Oh, okay.
I think this is a total no-brainer. I mean, McCoy and Ace in the 80s, with dark stuff going on, a big organisation to take down. Again, I'm not necessarily saying, hey, let's have Sylvester hanging out with Mike and Dustin and Lucas and the kids. This is more the vibe of Stranger Things and that kind of story. I just think the Seventh Doctor and Ace could walk into this and not look out of place, whereas I don't see a lot of other Doctors actually working in that era.
Can I give you the one that I would like to see?
Yeah.
I want to see Colin in Stranger Things. Because the idea of Colin as the Pied Piper leading around this group of crazy kids,
Yes.
I think that actually would work even better than McCoy, although I think McCoy spent a lot of time just going, why are these kids annoying me so much?
Well, Colin's got the outfit for the 80s, the bright colours. Yeah, he'd look in place in the mall, in any mall scenes.
Yes, and what is Ace doing in your crossover?
Well, I think she's just assisting. She could hit things with a baseball bat. I think she'd feel quite at home. The 80s is her era,
Teaching the kids how to make Nitro 9?
Yeah, stuff like that. That'd be pretty cool.
No, that is cool. I like that. That's lots of fun. And a good to have a current show in the mix as well. I've got one or two of those.
Okay.
My next one is similar in some ways to one of your earlier picks, Rob. I am also doing a Hartnell pick because I had to have a Hartnell in there. So I'm going the First Doctor, Ian, Barbara and Vicky.
Yeah.
And I'm putting them into Elizabeth R.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Now, you know that I like my big Hartnell historicals.
Yes.
And so imagine that classic Season 2 TARDIS crew arrives and there's Glenda Jackson's Queen Elizabeth. And Hartnell and Glenda Jackson's Queen Elizabeth just working together. You've got Robert Dudley played by Robert Hardy. You've got a huge cast of, Doctor Who style actors in there. But I guess I'm kind of trying to recreate something like the Crusades. We've got a really good actor there playing Richard I, and now I've got Elizabeth I. And I think that the Day of the Doctor, whilst had a lot of fun in the Elizabethan era, I thought didn't really do that character or that era justice at all, which is fine. It wasn't trying to. I get that. I'm not sticking the boot in. It just didn't. Whereas you could imagine Hartnell hanging out with that really powerful portrayal of Elizabeth I, getting involved in court intrigue, getting involved in drama, getting involved in the Babington plot or something like that, I think would be really effective. And look, I just want to see William Hartnell and Glenda Jackson play off each other, frankly.
Nice. I like that one a lot, actually. Yeah, I can see that working.
Your fourth, Rob.
Yes. Now, this one's interesting, Dave, because I've picked a show I've never actually watched.
Okay.
I want to put the Peter Davison Doctor and Perry into Downton Abbey.
Okay.
Now, because I haven't actually watched Downton Abbey, this certainly isn't a vote for something in the show's storyline or the characters or actors who portray those characters. Again, for me, it's the setting. And I have often lamented how Davo is set up to be this guy who feels like he's from the 1920s, even pre-World War I at a pinch. And yet, he's never sent there, except in, the little two-parter of Black Orchid. It's just this huge opportunity, I think. And Downton Abbey is out there in the public consciousness as being this 1910s, 20s sort of area. So I've picked up on that. And to me, it's just a no-brainer to put Davo in that kind of environment. And Perry, being American, brings that sort of outsider vibe, a bit of curiosity to people of the UK in that era. I think you could wheedle something interesting out of Davo and Perry and Downton Abbey.
Look, I can't really comment much more on the show than you can because I haven't seen it either. And indeed, as I think I've mentioned before, I went several years convinced it was set in downtown New York because I thought it was called Downtown Abbey. So that's how little I knew about the show for a while. But look, the thing that I like about that is that I agree that Davo in that environment would work really well, but giving Perry something like that to do where she can explore history, I think would be a really good use of the character that we really didn't get to see. Some glimpses of it in Mark of the Rani, but I'd like to see a lot more of that, and yeah, that works for me.
Yeah, she's not in a tight pair of shorts. She's not being lusted after by some maniac.
Well, she might be. I don't know how lustful the cast of Downton Abbey are, but I'm sure there's some lectures in there somewhere.
But you know what I mean.
I do.
It could be a good chance to do something different. Yeah.
She can be lusted over with class.
Exactly.
My fourth, I am putting the 11th Doctor, Amy and Rory, into Press Gang.
Oh, wow. Okay. And Moffat is writing it, I guess.
And Moffat is writing it. So, look, you get all of that dialogue. You get all of those characters working together. And I can see that the scene I have in my head is the 11th Doctor bursting into the press room and saying, everybody needs to leave now because there's something dangerous coming around the corner. And Linda Day turning around and going, no, it's my press room. Get out.
Yes.
And it goes from there. And that's what I want. And again, Rory and Amy would have fun interacting with that cast. But again, just the ideas of that press gang crew having to deal with something alien. I think I'm going to go down the alien invasion path, or just like a renegade alien monster or something, and just them dealing with that in all their different sort of ways. Colin probably trying to sell it something, others
So
trying
you're
to
rewriting class, Dave.
Well, and it did occur to me as I was doing this, because I did and then I said maybe I should make it Grange Hill, but no, I don't think that would quite work. I think you need that strong character to sort of do it. And then I thought, am I going down the path of class? Maybe a little bit. And look, you and I enjoy class, so I could see maybe I'm hankering for it to have been done that way. Maybe a little bit, but again, Linda Day fights aliens. I want to see.
Well, she'd fight anybody, basically.
Well, that's the point. That's exactly right. How does she deal when she's confronted with a homicidal maniac alien?
Moving on to my penultimate choice.
Yes.
I'm putting the Capaldi Doctor and Bill into the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. Now, for those who aren't sure which series of Sherlock Holmes I might mean, I'm talking 1980s, I'm talking Jeremy Brett era Sherlock Holmes. And I guess in some ways this would turn out to be similar to Robot of Sherwood. You'd have the 12th Doctor meeting up with this fictional character, sort of surprised at his existence perhaps, and of course Holmes would be a complete arse to Capaldi. Yet infuriating because he's so hyper-intelligent, the stuff he's saying to Capaldi is probably right. So, Capaldi's annoyed that he's not the smartest man in the room and that Holmes is being rude to him, even though that's how Capaldi can be to people himself. Basically familiarity breeding contempt and all of that. So, yeah, I think this would be something I'd like to see. I think Capaldi working through a straightforward mystery too, Holmes style, would be a lot of fun. Not trying to save Missy or banging on about the hybrid or some, bollocks like that. Just a good, solid adventure, not facing off against Holmes, but sort of competing with him in some way. That's
a really interesting pick, and one I certainly didn't expect. I haven't seen the Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes, but I know that people who are fans of the character and of Sherlock Holmes speak very, very highly of that series. I know it's very well regarded. As someone who's not a fan of Sherlock Holmes, I actually would take it in a different direction, which is the Doctor calling out a lot of Sherlock Holmes, bulldust, basically. So when Holmes turns around and does his whole, I saw a speck of mud on that guy's pants, from which I deduced that he is in fact a divorcee with leprosy. Capaldi would go, well, that's ridiculous. There's 47 explanations of why that could be. How could you can't jump to that conclusion? You're making it up. I would love to see Sherlock Holmes called out by Capaldi. I think that's how I would do it, but I get where you're coming from.
Nice, very nice.
And I must admit, I came very close to putting Capaldi in Babylon 5. That was my almost made the list one, but I didn't quite get there.
Okay.
What did get there, though, my penultimate one, I am putting the 4th Doctor and Leela into The Mandalorian.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So how this episode goes, the Doctor and the Mandalorian are on a more investigative sort of thing. Maybe they're on board an ex-Imperial starship or something, and they're finding out what's going on. The Doctor's using his sonic screwdriver. He's finding out data. The Mandalorian's protecting him. They have a different attitude, but they end up kind of working together and finding the next big piece of the story, or the next MacGuffin that moves things along. And in the meantime, Leela goes on with the rest of the crew and has to do some sort of mission, rescue someone from somewhere or capture something from somewhere. So she gets to do all that hunting, and everybody's really amazed by her skills with weapons, and Leela gets to play with blasters and all that sort of thing. So both of the TARDIS crew members, they're doing their own sort of thing in the Mandalorian universe, and the Doctor lecturing people about casually killing each other.
Well, I see the crossover there the potential for Leela to be fascinated by Mandalorian culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
And sort of be interested in their armor and weapons made out of Beskar and things like that. Maybe she could take away a Beskar throwing knife or something, something like that.
Yeah, and I could see Leela at the end of the episode, like maybe at the start of the episode she says fighting for money is not fighting with honor, and at the end of it she says I was wrong, you do fight with honor. That's the sort of arc I see it all going down.
Oh, very nice. I like that one a lot.
Yeah, I actually do want to see that one. Your final one.
My final. Yes, okay. I'm taking the Christopher Eccleston Doctor and Rose, and I'm plonking them down in Westworld.
We came so close to a snap there.
Did we really?
Well, we'll find out, but we haven't, so keep going.
Now, this is one where I think a crossover could actually work and he could interact with the characters and all of that. Because I think you could have the Ninth Doctor literally get inside Delos Incorporated and investigate what's going on in the park, how they've made these lifelike hosts and all of that. I think he'd be against it. I think he'd take the position that these hosts can think and feel, yet people are there to shoot them, have sex with them, all of that stuff. And I think he'd be pretty disgusted by it. So I think you'd have this story where he's trying to stop it, but he's got the Delos security onto him. Maybe even hosts are chasing him through the different worlds, Shogun World, Westworld, all of that, and trying to kill him. Basically, the things he's there to protect are trying to take him down. I think that could be an amazing story. I think that could actually work. And I think Eccleston was my choice doctor for that environment.
Yeah, I think that works really well. I don't really have anything to add on that one.
Okay.
My final one, and we half snapped on this, so that's interesting. We both picked it as our final one as well. For my final pick, I am going to have the last Time Lord meet the last human, because I'm going to put the Eccleston Doctor and Rose into Red Dwarf.
Lovely. Is it a comedy?
It would be a comedy, but with the darker moments. I'm particularly putting them into seasons 1 and 2 Red Dwarf. That original sort of character, that slightly drier, very, very funny, but very little bit more dry and a little bit more weighty sort of stuff.
The reason I ask is because, as you would know, when Rob Grant and Doug Naylor sort of split up and wrote their own novels, one of them still wrote funny novels, and then one of them wrote really, really dark and depressing novels. So I had to ask. It's
so true. No, they're both co-writing at this stage. It's the first couple of seasons, and again, I can see different scenarios playing out. I think one of the emotional scenes of that is going to be a moment where Lister is talking about his depression as he's the last human being left alive, and the Doctor can say, well, I'm the last Time Lord alive, and these are the only two characters in the rest of the universe that can relate to how each other's feeling about this. I think that would be a really nice emotional moment. At the same time, you're going to have the cat, Lister and Rimmer meeting Rose and just like, oh my God, it's a woman, and all the different reactions to that and how they might try and court her. The Doctor sort of being slightly baffled by Holly and what's gone wrong with Holly. Rose looking at the technology of Red Dwarf and going, give me some Spock. This is not what I expected from 24th century technology. And honestly, there'll be some really good scenes in there. Throw in some sort of incident or issue to drive the plot along. But look, I just couldn't go past the last Time Lord meets the last human.
And a Liverpudlian and a Mancunian accent as well.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, yes.
Great. I love it.
So they were our crossovers. Let us know what you thought. Let us know what ideas you had. None of them are ever going to happen.
No.
But look, it's all a bit of fun.